Welcome to the deep dive. So, World Asthma Day 2025 is basically right here.
And the theme this year is empowering asthma care.
Exactly. And that feels like the perfect jumping off point for what we're digging into today. Asthma Friend.
Right. A platform that was actually started by someone living with asthma.
Yeah, and we really want to understand, why it started, what's the story behind it, and what kind of support it actually offers people.
It sounds like a really valuable resource.
I think so. Whether you have asthma yourself, or maybe you know someone who does, or heck, even if you're just curious, hopefully this gives some useful insights. Insights into the real experience and, the power of these community-driven things.
Definitely. And often it's those personal struggles, isn't it, that lead to the best solutions. Asthma Friend seems to be a classic case of that.
Okay, so where did it start? What's the origin story here?
Well, our sources really focus on the founder's own experience with asthma. And a key thing was this feeling of being quite isolated.
Isolated. But asthma's so common, isn't it? Like hundreds of millions worldwide.
Over 300 million, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You can be surrounded by statistics, but still feel totally alone in your day-to-day struggle.
Right, like those moments, maybe missing parties or struggling through a big meeting or, I don't know, even just coughing during phone calls, things that just chip away at you.
Exactly. The founder experienced all that, how asthma just sort of shadowed everything, and it led to feeling like they were the only one dealing with it that way, even knowing the numbers.
That makes sense. You feel like your specific version of it isn't understood.
Precisely. And that feeling links directly to the resources, or lack thereof. The founder found that the usual asthma info was often, well, a bit generic.
Generic? How so?
Often outdated, perhaps,
Right.
but also crucially, not really addressing specific cultural or regional contexts,
Right.
especially the Indian context was mentioned.
Okay, right. That's interesting. Give me an example.
Well, the material we looked at mentions things like trying to manage breathing during Diwali with all the extra pollution. That's a very specific challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or navigating expectations in a joint family setting.
Yeah.
Or even something really personal like how do you bring up having asthma when you start dating someone?
Okay, yeah. Those are things a standard medical leaflet just isn't going to touch on, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
And it was seeing this gap, this lack of relatable, practical advice for those kinds of real-life situations that seems to have been the turning point.
Aha moment.
Sort of. The realization that, okay, I'm not technically alone, but the available stuff makes me feel alone in my specific struggles. And that's what sparked Asthma Friend.
So it wasn't like some big health organization decided this was needed. It really came from the ground up.
Directly from lived experience. Someone saying, hey, we need a better way to talk about this, to share what it's really like.
And that authenticity must be a huge part of it.
It's central. The platform explicitly says it's built by a real human with asthma for humans with asthma. That framing immediately builds a different kind of connection,
Yeah, trust. Understanding.
Exactly. And the core mission, based on our sources, is all about creating that space. A space for stories that people can actually relate to, tips that are genuinely useful, and just a community where people get it. No explanations needed.
And they've approached this in quite a few ways, haven't they? It's not just one thing.
No, it's definitely multifaceted, which is smart because people connect in different ways.
So what have they got?
Well, there's a blog with over 90 posts, apparently, covering a huge range of stuff.
90 posts. Wow.
Yeah. And importantly, they often weave in the founder's own experiences, which, again, adds that layer of relatability we were talking about.
Makes it real.
Then there's a podcast, too.
Oh, interesting. How many episodes?
19, based on our info. And there's a really practical touch here. They sometimes use an AI-generated voice.
AI. Why is that?
It allows them to keep putting content out consistently, even if the founder is having a bad asthma day and can't physically speak easily.
Huh. That's actually really clever and shows serious dedication, doesn't it? Overcoming a barrier like that.
It really does. It ensures the community gets regular support.
Okay, so blog, podcast, what else?
Community building across different platforms. So WhatsApp groups, a presence on Quora, Facebook, meeting people where they are.
Makes sense. Different people prefer different spaces.
And then there's short form video. This really caught my eye.
Like reels and shorts.
Exactly. Apparently, they've racked up something like 70,000 views across those platforms.
70,000. That's pretty significant reach. especially for those quick hits of info or connection.
It really is. It shows they understand how people consume content now.
Yeah.
Quick, digestible, relatable.
So it's a really comprehensive approach then, catering to lots of different preferences for how people want to learn and connect.
That seems to be the goal, yeah.
Hmm.
Multiple pathways to find information and, maybe more importantly, support.
Okay, let's talk about the content itself. What kind of themes or insights are they sharing? One thing that jumped out at me from the notes was this idea. Asthma isn't one size fits all.
Absolutely central. That
Yeah.
seems to be a core message. Recognizing that asthma shows up so differently for everyone.
Yeah, my triggers aren't your triggers. The severity can be wildly different.
Exactly. What it feels like, how it impacts your life, it's incredibly varied. This heterogeneity, they call it sometimes. Asthma Friend really seems to lean into that by sharing lots of different stories and viewpoints.
And it looks like they've grouped these insights into roughly 4 areas to help organize it.
Yeah, that's a helpful way to look at it. The first one is environmental triggers.
Okay, so beyond just pollen and dust mites.
Oh, way beyond. Though those are covered too, of course. But they really dig into things like air pollution, which is obviously a huge factor in many places, especially urban areas.
Sure.
And there was a specific story mentioned about a workplace asthma attack triggered by fresh paint fumes.
Wow. Something seemingly innocent.
Right. It really brings home how triggers can be anywhere.
Yeah.
Things you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Yeah, it does. Anything else under trigger?
There was a personal story about aroma candles causing a severe reaction. Again, something lots of people use without a second thought.
Good to be aware of.
And practical stuff too, like tips on preventing mold growth at home, focusing on those indoor environmental factors that often get missed.
Right, those little things that can actually make a big difference. It really highlights needing that personalized awareness, doesn't it?
Definitely. So moving on from triggers, the second category was about how asthma affects more than just lungs.
Okay, what does that cover?
Well, a big one is the connection between GERD, acid reflux, and asthma.
Ah, right. I've heard of that link. One can trigger the other.
Exactly. It's a connection many people might not realize is impacting their asthma control,
What else?
the impact on voice and communication.
Oh.
Well, think about it. If you're often coughing or short of breath or wheezing, it affects how you sound, how easily you can speak. It can impact confidence, phone calls, presentations.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not just about getting air in, it's about how it affects your interaction out.
Precisely. And they also touch on silent asthma,
Silent asthma.
where the usual symptoms like wheezing might not be obvious, but there are still significant issues happening internally, which can be quite dangerous if it's not recognized. Raising awareness about that is vital.
Okay, got it. What's the third category?
This one's really interesting. Asthma and relationships. It looks at the social and emotional side.
Ah, so beyond the purely medical.
Yeah. Because living with a chronic condition doesn't just affect you physically. It affects your friendships, your family life, dating.
And this is where that personal human touch of Asthma Friend probably really comes through.
I think so.
Hmm.
The source material mentions things like offering advice on how friends can be supportive. Not just sympathetic, but actively supportive.
That's useful.
And tackling things like when and how do you talk about asthma when you're dating someone new? That could be awkward territory.
Definitely.
They even included the perspective of the founder's wife, talking about what it's like living with someone who has asthma. That kind of shared experience from partners or family is invaluable.
Yeah, hearing both sides. Were there any specific examples of social frustrations mentioned? Like misunderstandings?
The material touched on that unpredictability, having to cancel plans last minute because of a flare-up.
Yeah.
That can lead to feeling isolated or misunderstood if friends don't really get the condition.
Right. It underlines needing that open conversation.
Absolutely. And also, specifically mentioning challenges within Indian joint families, that goes back to the cultural nuance. Balancing personal health needs with family expectations and dynamics. That's complex stuff.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final category.
Real-life challenges and solutions. So this is very much the practical, day-to-day management stuff. Like the founder's personal strategy for using public transport in India, specifically avoiding the heated metro coaches, finding they were a trigger.
Huh. That's such a specific lived experience tip.
Exactly. The kind of thing you only figure out by doing it. Also, tips for managing nocturnal asthma that gets worse at night.
That can be really disruptive to sleep and life.
Hugely. And addressing the very specific difficulties of living with asthma in a place like Delhi NCR, known for its air quality challenges. Tackling those localized real-world problems head-on.
So, yeah, when you pull all these threads together, Blog posts, podcasts, community, videos tackling triggers, relationships, daily life. It's clear Asthma Friend is doing a lot more than just sharing medical facts.
It really seems to be building a dynamic, empathetic community. It's all built on shared experience, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And this genuine drive to support each other.
And that ties back so well to World Asthma Day this year, empowering asthma care. This feels like empowerment in action.
It really does. The core message running through Asthma Friend, and it echoes World Asthma Day perfectly, is that every breath counts. Every person's experience matters.
And crucially, you shouldn't have to feel alone figuring it all out.
Exactly. No one should feel isolated on that journey.
And there's a call to action in there too, isn't there?
Yes.
From the founder.
Yes. A really powerful invitation, actually. Share your stories. Talk about your triggers. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
And pass it on. Share the info with others.
Yeah. Share Asthma Friend with people who might benefit. It's all about building that collective knowledge and support rooted in community.
Because the big picture, the long-term vision, seems to be about making the world just generally more asthma-friendly, right?
That's the idea. Through sharing stories, providing useful resources, and just having more open conversations about it all, it shows how powerful lived experience can be when it's shared.
So, wrapping up our deep dive here, Asthma Friend really does feel like a testament to that power. The power of personal experience, community, tackling the real messy challenges of living with asthma.
It absolutely highlights why we need relatable information, why understanding triggers beyond the obvious medical ones is so important, and why we can't ignore the social and emotional side of it all.
Which leads us to a final thought, maybe, for you listening, building on that call to action from Asthma Friend.
Yeah, what's one small thing, one small step you could maybe take today to understand asthma better or support someone you know who lives with it?
Or even just advocate for a more asthma-friendly environment in your own corner of the world.
Could be sharing something you learned here, starting a conversation, or even just noticing potential triggers around you at home, at work, in the community. Something to think about.